Hello, my fellow seekers. Welcome to Into the Work, therapy for empaths, seekers, and the intuitively driven, where you have front row seats to therapy sessions and expert interviews that will help you define the important work that you're here to do. So I guess you actually have something better than front row seats. You practically have a seat on my couch. That's right, you will have unrestricted access to actual sessions with real people, exploring real life issues. You will continue to be inspired by powerful conversations with experts and healers that might just share exactly what it is that you need to hear to get unstuck. I am Michelle Pauverman. I am a recovering people pleaser and former anxiety-driven empath, turned now mostly grounded psychotherapist and intuitive coach. I have been helping people for almost 20 years manage their limiting beliefs and anxiety to finally stop the self-sabotage and step into their gifts. I created this podcast, Into the Work, to give you a place to learn more about yourself and give you actionable strategies to finally move those roadblocks holding you back so you can go for what you want. Above all else, my hope is that this podcast is a catalyst for your awakening. If you're listening, you've already taken a step towards getting off of autopilot, and our next steps together will be taken episode by episode, waking you up to the possibilities, the new ways of thinking and being, so that you can stretch into that next level of your story. The spark has already been lit, and my friend, this is a journey from spark to brilliance. So together, let's light a fire. Welcome back to Into the Work, therapy for empaths and seekers. I'm so glad you're here today because we are diving into something that every empath, every healer, every heart-led human has wrestled with at some point in your life. How to set boundaries with really negative people. Without abandoning your compassion, without severing the relationship. Sometimes that might need to happen, but how can you do this without feeling guilty? How can you do this to protect your sanity and know you're doing the right thing? So you know the feeling. Someone starts talking, and before you know it, you have become the emotional dumping ground. They vent, they spiral, they complain, they leave feeling slightly better. Maybe they feel a little lighter because they've dumped a load out, but you're left totally drained. You're like spinning. Perhaps you're even questioning if it's even okay for you to feel overwhelmed by this, but you are definitely feeling unwell and exhausted and depleted from being dumped on. And honestly, I'm sure you feel like I never want to do that again. While simultaneously, you also know it's going to happen again next week, right? So this episode is your reminder that it is okay to protect your peace. That empathy and support does not equal self-sacrifice. And we're going to talk about how to spot emotional dumping versus healthy emotional sharing. There's a difference. The difference between handling this with new acquaintances and handling it in long-term relationships. How to set boundaries that act like bridges, not walls. And how to know when it's time to lovingly walk away. This isn't about judging others for their pain. It is about choosing not to carry what isn't yours and learning to show up for others without abandoning yourself. So if you've ever felt stuck between being a good listener and protecting your energy, this one's for you. So let's get into it. So first, I want to just lay the foundation that as empaths and sensitive peeps, we can confuse holding space with losing yourself. Right? We can go to hold space for others, and we can kind of become accustomed to getting a little bit lost and certainly pummeled at times by other people's emotions and the stuff that they're bringing. So if you need to hear this, I want to say to you that you can witness someone's storm without making it your weather, right? You can totally witness this without making it yours. Now, part of our work is the boundaries with ourselves and being accountable to how we show up and how we care for ourselves. This is where I'm kind of giving you the nudge here that I'm saying to you directly, it is your responsibility to care for yourself to clarify your needs and not necessarily for somebody to guess what those needs are. And a big part of this is your commitment to no longer self-abandoning. I want you to say, here, Michelle, raise your hand. I'm going to do this. I am not doing it anymore. And learn how to set boundaries that serve you and serve your relationships, right? That make them deeper, better, stronger. Let's start with the difference between emotional dumping and emotional sharing. Life is hard. I know you know that. We all know this, that at any given moment, traumatic things happen, hard things happen. It's not a bad thing to share this part of ourselves with others or to need support when things are hard and we go through things. I'm definitely not saying that, we can't truly be there and hold space for other people, because that is your beautiful gift, right? We just need to learn how to not self-abandon when we do it. So there is a difference between emotional sharing and emotional dumping. So first of all, I want you to understand that emotional dumping is a boundary issue, not a kindness issue. It is your boundary issue that you're having with somebody who also has boundary issues. And it's not about whether or not you're being kind or not. It's whether or not what you're doing with your boundary issue, right? And how you're going to manage it. Now, how to recognize it. Dumping is one-sided venting with no interest in solutions or balance, right? They are not there to truly fix it. You'll even come across, when you try to fix it, there'll be resistance to fixing it. Likely they are chronic complaining or sort of get caught up in drama cycles. But the key signs are also that you feel drained, used, anxious, or like you've become someone's therapist. The biggest tell is when you feel trapped in a conversation. It's a terrible feeling, right? Where you feel like, I can't get out of this. I'm starting to feel trapped and anxious, and I don't have the words to get myself out. And now I'm just building animosity, resentment, and frustration. It might have even started off as a positive conversation and suddenly sideswiped you and suddenly feels like it's just losing control fast. So you didn't even know how to get your boundary in there, because all of a sudden this person's going on a rampage or ranting, and emotional dumping can just feel like this laundry list sometimes that goes back years even, right? That's another thing about emotional dumping is there is not a lot of boundaries, and we'll talk about that, because these people are not having boundaries and self-awareness or other awareness. They are just lost in all their feelings and they're spewing it out. And many times what comes out is a laundry list that goes back years. A lot of times when you talk to somebody who's sort of dumping and going back so far in time, those are things that are over. There's no fixing those things, right? They're not trying to how can I approach this thing, right? They're not trying to take responsibility for their part. They're not trying to grow in it or learn from it. They're not looking for, anything but you just validating that they're your victim, that they are valid in all their awful feelings. And that's really it. Anything more than that is typically resisted. And that's the difference between when you are talking with somebody who is just sharing their emotions. They're open to looking at things. They're open from learning from them. They're open to exploring it and seeing how they can get out of this place that they're in, or how they can heal something with somebody else, or, they are open. And that's why the conversation doesn't feel bad. It feels productive. You feel connected to that person through this conversation. You feel good about that conversation. Like maybe you felt like you were really helpful, or that you learned something from this person. There is an openness to solving the issue. There is a desire to take responsibility while also exploring just their emotions and how they feel. And that's a beautiful thing. But when it comes to dumping, honestly, there typically is zero regard as to whether you are even open or available for this. There's no asking. I mean, even sometimes there might be somebody who's a little more self-aware, and they might say to you, I'm about to dump on you. Can I just do that? And it is your responsibility to say, no, actually, that doesn't work for me. But let's look at why, and we're going to get into how to actually show up and manage this, and how to say the words, what to say. But why do people dump? And I think it's helpful to understand a little bit the psychology or where someone's coming from when they're dumping. And it might help you on how you want to address this. It might change the flavor of how you show up in it. So first of all, there is, like we said, there's a lack of self-awareness. They're clearly, if you're like drowning, if you're like sitting across from them or on the phone or whatever, and you're like trapped, sweating, I got to get out of this. You're irritated. You've passively dropped a bunch of hints that like, I got to go or, something. They're not picking up on it. They are totally self-involved in their own story, and they are not aware of how they're coming across, what they're doing, and its impact on you. Now, we got to couple that with a lack of emotional regulation skills. So a lot of times these people start talking about this. Maybe they've been festering it until they get on the phone. It's been spinning, going on and on and on in their heads. And they feel overwhelmed by their own rage, disgust, triggers, hard feelings. They're overwhelmed by them. And so when they open their mouth to talk, it's like this flooding that comes out because they are flooded in it too. And so they're flooding you because they're flooded by it and they don't know what to do with it. And they probably cycle and spin in this victim stance. And so they likely are completely unaware of how they're contributing to the problem. So they have no power. And so there's powerlessness. If they don't take responsibility, if they're not like, I'm looking at what's mine here, which nobody dumping ever does. And so they are just not ready or willing or have the skill set to recognize that they are contributing to the problem. So they're not taking any responsibility. They are unaware what they are creating in it and are typically fixated on being a victim. And they believe their dumping kind of makes them more powerful, right? So they feel powerless and overwhelmed, and dumping gives them a quick hit. It makes them feel powerful. Just like anger can make us feel powerful as a powerful emotion, dumping can kind of give them a boost while simultaneously it's killing you, right? It's taking away your power and giving them some. So they are typically stuck in their festering. They're stuck in some sort of pain cycle, and they want to include you in it to be less alone because they are likely all alone in it. And because they don't effectively know how to manage their emotions, they're not going to this person and saying, hey, they don't know how to manage it. And so they are spinning in it and they're alone in it. It's also possible that they are insecure about how they're handling something. Maybe they're really stepping out of alignment with their values. Maybe they're doing something or behaving in such a way that they don't love. And so in order to rest at night, they need to get you on their side, right? So the victim stance comes in as a way to buffer the fact that I don't really like who I am right now, right? Or maybe there's something that happened that they have a hard time with, how they behaved in it. And instead of taking responsibility, they are looking to you to get them on your side so they feel better. Sometimes it's even a shadow part. I don't know if you listened to my shadow work episode. It was number 1, I believe, very beginning. It was a great episode to explain to you about shadow parts. But sometimes what they see in somebody else, they really hate about themselves, right? So if you have something within you that you deny, that you cannot tolerate, that's hard for you, and you try to hide it because you're embarrassed, you're ashamed, whatever you don't like about you, you're going to hate in other people. And so a lot of times they're stuck in this trigger that they have no self-awareness that this is their shit, that this is really about them. And so they don't know how to work that out. And so what happens is, and this is what's key here, is the more they vent to everyone about how horrible that person is, it's an effort to ensure that everyone knows that that's not them. They're not like that. And the more they vent about that other person, about how horrible they are, it's really an indication of the fact that that really is a reflection of them. They have that part They don't want it. They disown it. They need you to all to know that they are not that. And so that comes up a lot too. So how do you deal with new friends and acquaintances, right? Like, what do you do when this is somebody that's new to your life? Maybe it's like a new person at work. Maybe it is, one of your kids' friends' parents, and they're coming to you. Maybe you have a side relationship. It's not a central relationship, but maybe you've been acquaintances for a while. But I'm telling you, there is a way for you to nip this in the bud as soon as it starts, because really it makes all the difference in the world if you set the tone early. And if you haven't done that, it's okay. You can always do it. The sooner the better. But setting the tone early is really, really good. And you can start by practicing really light boundaries, depending on how desperate and awful you feel, how uncomfortable it is for you. You have to gauge what is right for you. And that's what's really important. But you can start with light boundaries like, hey, they're going in this direction. You can sense it. And you can say, you know what? I have to stop you. I only have a few minutes, but I want to be present while I can. And say, I have 10 minutes, and just put a cap around it. So you feel in control. It's not costing you years off your life. You are giving them the 10 minutes, and that feels okay to you. Another way of dealing with this is when somebody comes in and they start dumping, and you say something like, wow, that sounds really intense. Have you talked to somebody about it? I would then redirect them to a resource or support. I have done this many times because I can see this person's in pain, and I am wanting to stay in alignment with my integrity and have some compassion for them, while also holding a boundary like, this sounds really incredible. This is something you really need to process. I really want to help you. Can I help you find a support? If you have tried resources and they're not working, let's ask around. Like, that could be something you do to help them out. But it sends the message that you're not their therapist, that you're not going to be the dumping ground. And I want to urge you to trust early red flags because, man, I'm telling you, when you sense that there's, especially early on, when you sense there's like drama, lack of self-awareness or awareness of your needs, when you see there's no reciprocity, this person just keeps coming in to get or to take or to just dump, and they're not really holding space for you. They're not equal partners and trying to, show up for you in the same way. You've got to recognize and decide in that moment, show up for yourself. Is this the relationship that you want to have? Does this contribute to the life you're trying to build? Does this contribute to the type of peace and mindset and well-being that you're working really hard on having? Because if it doesn't, it is okay for you to set a boundary and even decide that this relationship is not one for you. And you can do it kindly. I am going to urge you, when you are setting boundaries with these people, to just do your best to not over-explain or over-apologize for needing or taking space, because it kind of gives a little bit of a loophole for those people that are super not aware. See, when we're so self-aware and so freaking aware of other people that it's like to the opposite extent, right? Like we're too aware, we have this way of thinking or perceiving that everybody else is similar, that they also will get my hints, those sorts of things. And honestly, over-explaining and over-apologizing and being passive and all those things, they actually leave loopholes, and they end up creating more drama and more issues than being very clear. And actually, it's kind for you to be clear. So we'll get into that. Now, if they ghost you or get offended, I just want to say to you, these are new people in your life. These are acquaintances. These are people coming in and out. That's data. That's information. And again, does that support the life you're trying to lead, the life you're building? And, if they get offended, a lot of times, these people who are in this place or who have a very strong relationship with their inner victim, they are easily offended. And you'll see that very quickly they can turn into being the victim with you. and that you're now the perpetrator. You're the one who's hurting them. And I want you to notice that. I want you to pick up on that. If this is someone you work with and you know you have to see every day, you can still do this in a kind and clear way. And just, you don't have to completely ignore them or, not show up or show up in a way that is disruptive at work. You can really do this in a very kind and clear way. And as long as you can get clear with yourself, that's all that matters. So let's talk about navigating long-term friends and family, because that's a lot more layered. There's history, there's loyalty, there's guilt. And so let's look at strategies there. I call this particular strategy the inclusive and compassionate redirect, okay? So let's say that somebody you really care about is totally dumping. You know them, you've known them to do this, but right now you're done, you're up to here, it's time for a boundary. And here's a way you can be inclusive by using we statements, but also being compassionate. Are you ready? Okay, pretend you're the person and I'm talking to you so you can see how it feels to receive this. Wow, I really care about you. I want our time together to feel good. I can see that talking about this is going to leave us both feeling totally exhausted. Do you think we could talk about something that recharges us both? I think that would be awesome for you and me, so let's do it. Okay, I'm going to ask you next, how is it going at your new job? Or change the subject to a place where you know that there's light. Change the subject to a place where you know that, how's your son doing? Or look at some other switch that you can make and you can see how that feels safe, right? I said, I care about you. I want our time together to feel good. I can see that talking about this is totally going to leave us both exhausted. And I'm not being mean. I'm not being rude, but I am being pretty clear. I changed the topic. I changed the subject. I'm not doing it. I'm not talking about that. If that person were to say, well, I need to talk about this, I'd say, well, it sounds like you perhaps need to find somebody to talk to. Have you had support? And then I would do that whole redirect with, getting a therapist or getting a support person, because it sounds really hard and that's horrible to feel that way. You can be empathic, but you're also being clear. I'm not a huge fan of this, but I do want to say it because some people feel better about scheduling the venting. I want to be here for you. Can we carve out a time that works for us both? So in other words, this time doesn't, right? You're catching me at a bad time. I'm exhausted. I'm burnt out. I had a long day. I'm making dinner. Whatever your reasoning is, say it. You can say what my reasoning is or not. And then you can say, can we carve out a time for both of us? Now, you're kind of hoping probably that if I carve out time later, that person won't dump. They'll be in a new headspace. But truly, likely, they're going to still dump. So I want you to ask yourself before you use that strategy, do you want to carve out time for both of you later to have this conversation? And if the answer is no, I want you to recognize then therefore you're being passive. And that can lead to more problems because then you're going to want to blow them off when it's time, right? And you're going to want to go through that again. And then you're going to get frustrated with them and resentful for them. But the real problem is that you weren't clear. That really is the issue. We all have to take responsibility, them and us. And you have to recognize, I don't want to have this conversation at all. Not next week, not next Tuesday, not today, right? And that's really important for you to acknowledge. There's also energetic time limits. Sometimes people will just say, hey, I have 20 minutes to talk. I want to make sure that I stay grounded. So I only have 20 minutes. Or you can say, I just simply have 20 minutes to talk. And therefore, to you, it feels like there's a boundary. Because sometimes the problem with the dumping truly is that it feels like they're taking over, that there's no end to it. You don't know how to end it. It's going on and on past your comfort zone. You can't do it anymore, but you don't know how to stop them. And then therefore, you're getting into a place of powerlessness. And they're spewing their powerlessness. And guess what? It's making you powerless, right? And so you really need to decide what does work for you. And if you're saying, okay, that 20 minutes makes sense for me. This is a friend of mine. She's in a really hard place. I know she's probably going to vent. You may feel very compassionate towards her and you want to give her that 20 minutes and you're okay with that. And then you have to say, I'm so sorry I have to stop you because my 20 minutes is up and I have to go. That's up to you. Because you could say that to her and she could go on for an hour and a half, and then you're pissed at the end of that, and it's not her fault, right? Not necessarily. It kind of is, but we know she already has no boundaries, and you have to make a decision and you have to take responsibility. Make sense? So let's look at boundaries as bridges, not walls, because a lot of us have this really antiquated conditioning that boundaries are being mean and all that. And honestly, they're just about clarity. Think about clarity with care. Have you ever felt like you were being kinder to someone by speaking indirectly or passively when you're setting a boundary? Like it's nicer to say, I might be able to help. I'm not really sure, but I have a lot of stuff going on. And then you kind of ramble instead of just saying, no, I can't help. Because we are conditioned to believe these boundaries are walls that push people away and that they are mean and selfish and about hurting or disappointing people. And we hate to disappoint people. It's like our Achilles heel. When we start feeling people are disappointed, we start wanting to overgive, over everything, right? We have created the habit of being passive as a means to feeling like, we are still being kind. And this is what it looks like. Okay, let's get a couple of examples here. And this will help us understand how we can build boundaries as bridges by being clean and clear. Okay, but here's what passivity looks like. Your friend starts venting again. I'm sure you've been there, so hear me out. Your friend starts venting again, deep into the same story for the 5th time this week. You're exhausted. But instead of clearly setting a boundary, you say, wow, yeah, that's a lot. I'm just kind of tired today, so I might not be super helpful. But yeah, I hear you. And that was your way of saying, I don't like this. I don't want to do this anymore. Now, what's really going on? You're hinting at needing space without claiming it. You aren't claiming it. You're just hinting. And again, you're hoping that they have the awareness that they do not have. They clearly don't have it. You're also trying to exit the emotional dump politely, but you're leaving the door open, right? You're trying to leave, but you're going to leave the door open. And that is a big no-no, because all that does is confuse the other person as to what you really mean. Like, are you here or are you not here? They don't understand. You may hope they'll pick up on your energy and change course. So that's why you're being passive. But they usually don't. Remember, they lack awareness. And why do you do this? Why do you become passive? Because you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings or seem cold. You're trying to be nice, but niceness becomes self-abandonment when it sacrifices your clarity. Because once you leave that door open, that's the door that's open to your self-abandonment. Okay, I want you to think that way. When I leave a door or window open for somebody to keep pushing through, doing something I don't want them to do, that is me being permissive about my self-sacrifice and my self-abandonment. Now, you are likely taught that directness is rude. I mean, because a lot of us come from people-pleasing ancestral lines. Like, many of us have been taught that speaking really directly is harsh or rude, or that saying no makes you selfish. But so that is why you're being passive. But that is not truth. That is not 100% true. It is absolutely not 100% true. And you always want to ask yourself when you come across something that you're like, I have a belief about this. Is that 100% true? Absolutely not. Okay, then I need to detach from that belief and find out what is true. Now, looking at a really more empowered version, because I love giving examples, and I think it's important to have examples. And so you're with a friend, they are, going through this story for the 15th time. You're done with the same story. You're literally crawling out of your skin as this person is going on and on about the same exact thing. And you say, hey, I really want to be a good friend to you, and I care about what you're going through so much. But at the same time, I'm feeling really emotionally full lately, and I don't have the space to hold this right now. Would you be open to checking in another time? Or I think maybe it's time for you to talk to someone who can really give you what you need, because you really have a need here. that's not being met. And I really would love to see you feel better in this. That is compassionate. That is grounded. And it gives a very clear signal while offering care, right? We can be loving and caring while also being very clear. I'm not going to do this anymore. It doesn't work for me anymore. I'm not feeling well and I'm feeling emotionally full lately, and I just don't have the space to hold this. But I really want you to feel better. See how that works? And that feels good. And I think we need to learn this language because the language you've been taught, or perhaps the language you witnessed when you were learning how to deal with people who are dumping and all that, but also anything, the language you witnessed when it came to boundary setting was likely possibly vague. Vague versus clear boundaries. Being kind does not mean being passive, being unclear, beating around the bush. And so I want to just go over a couple of statements that you might need to put in your inventory. So when somebody comes up to you and they start dumping and you say something like, oh, I'm just kind of tired today. You think you're sending a signal like, this isn't really cool for me today. But that is just a big fat door wide open. They're just like, oh, yeah, really? Okay, let me just tell you about my thing, right? They are not aware. A clear and soulful way of doing this is I care about you, but I don't have the energy to hold space right now. I really just don't. And then you redirect. Another vague or passive statement is, sorry, I've just been really busy. And it's your way of trying to push them away. They're coming to you. They want to talk about this thing. And you're like, oh, and they're like, oh, you haven't returned any phone calls. And you're like, oh, sorry, I've just been busy. Instead, you could be clear and you could say, hey, thanks for thinking of me, but I'm not really available to talk about this right now. Vague and passive could be someone asks something of you. Maybe, hey, can we talk more about this later tonight? I gotta go, but I need to still vent about this thing. And you're like, hell no, I am not doing this with you tonight. I'm not doing this a second time because you're drowning the first time, right? And you say something like, I don't know, I can try to make it work. And every party was like, I'm not going to make it work, right? I'm going to have something happen. Something is suddenly going to come up. But it's still not clear. It's not kind. It's vague. It's passive. And it actually is just a big fat door. So then they're going to look at, well, when do you have time? Do you have tomorrow? Let's talk tomorrow morning. Do you have tomorrow morning? Right? And then you're like, you're feeling totally overwhelmed. Instead, I want you to say, you know what? This just doesn't work for me. But I hope it goes well. I really would like to help you find some help, right? I want to find someone where you can feel better. I really want you to feel better, but this isn't working for me. And somebody might feel completely floored by that response. Like, oh, right? I'm sorry. And then you want to backpedal. You're looking for the best way that you can hit reverse, go back in time and change it, because it is so uncomfortable for them to feel hurt or disappointed or offended, I guess is another word. And so your job is not to manage that. You can be kind, and we'll talk about that, but your job is not to erase that, because that, my dear, is not your job to somehow change their programming so they can hear that better, right? That is their job. And you can't do the work for them, but you can be kind. And so you can say, yeah, I really see that's taking you off guard. I don't want this to catch you off guard. I care about you and I want you to feel better. I just know I don't have the resources for it right now because I have my own stuff going on. Whatever you want to say. But it's just being honest and clear. And that's it. It is up to them to, if they don't have the resources to deal with that, to go find them, to work that out somewhere. And maybe they'll be venting about you with somebody else, but that you don't have control over that. That's not your person if that's happening, right? That's not what, is that the person you want to have in your life that supports the kind of life you want to have, right? The life you're trying to build. And, when you're really not available for something, I don't want you to say, I don't know, maybe later, I really want you to say I can't be available for that, but thank you for asking. And that can be it right there. Oh, I can't do that, but thank you for asking. You don't even have to explain it. You don't even have to directly go into it any further. As long as you're very clear, there's also a way for you to decipher. That sounds really tough, is what you might say. Like you're totally dissociating and you're like, it sounds really tough and you just want to run. But I want to say to you, there's also a way for you to say, hey, this sounds really big. Are you looking for support or do you just want to vent? And have them sort that out. Am I looking for support? Yes. Do I just want to vent? Oh, those are two separate things. And so they're like, oh, I guess I'm looking for support. Okay, well, let's look at what this might be reflecting about you and what you can learn about yourself in this process. And that conversation would feel a hell of a lot better, right? Helping them come to some new realization about themselves, what they're learning, but they may not be up for that. And that's fine. You can say, if it's just to vent, I have to put a boundary there just because it's really burning me out. But the truth is that all of this dumping is so low vibe that it's literally making you feel like crap. And that is why a good redirect is simply can just be like, I wonder what this is really all about for you and what you can learn about yourself in this. It can kind of really keep them from moving forward in it. Like you're, again, pulling it apart and turning it around on them. Hey, I wonder what this is really all about for you. I wonder what you could learn about yourself in this, because that's really where we have power. That's the only place we have power. They'd be like, what? Right? But they have a decision to make when you go ahead and enter that into the conversation. They now have the responsibility of deciding, do I want to do that or don't I want to do that? And then you get to decide what you want to stick around for. Let's bring in some reminders here. I want you to remember that clear boundaries actually build trust with other people because they know where they stand. They know and see that you're transparent in what you're about, what's good for you, what does not good for you. And that makes you super trustworthy. That makes you safe. People who are passive aren't actually safe because they say one thing with a big door open and then they actually feel a different way. And then, at some point, all of a sudden they blow up or you'll blow up because you're up to your eyeballs in your resentment. Vague boundaries often also lead to this resentment energy leaks, like I'm saying. So it's actually so important for your well-being that you can say no with love and integrity, that you don't need a crisis to justify setting a limit. Your need is enough. Like you can allow this to come into any conversation that just starts to hit a nerve, just starts to hit like this isn't working for me. It doesn't have to be huge. And when you're speaking directly, I really want you to say what you are available for, because a lot of times when we're in this situation, we feel so uncomfortable saying what we aren't available for because it feels like a big shutdown. But I think it could help to balance yourself out what you are available for. But really, honestly, you're trying to say it's not at the cost of my own peace. Because here's the thing. At the end of the day, really, you have to live with you. This is your life. This is your well-being. This is how much energy you have. And I know it feels like a renewable resource because it keeps coming back at some degree somehow, but it is taking a toll if you continue to do this. And if you feel powerless in your life, that is a massive energy leak and it can affect your health. And so I really want to say this really openly and directly that your goal really should be that you become more connected to your well-being than you do your fear. And you're not afraid of everything falling apart because I'll be okay no matter what. I want you to really work on saying these sort of mantras to yourself that I'm going to be okay no matter what. And my well-being is far more important to me than my fear. Now, you're going to know that all of this is too much. You're going to know when there's repetition but no growth, right? That story keeps repeating itself and it never changes and it's not getting better. When you dread contact or feel resentful with a friend or a coworker or somebody, that is your cue that it's time to set a boundary. You can't recover after being with them and you feel exhausted and you need to lay down. That is your cue. That is your work that you did not set a boundary. And that's okay. You're learning. And so you're like, oh, I can't do that anymore. If you noticing it, it's impacting your health, that it feels unwell, that it feels like manipulation, right? That you're being manipulated in some way. That also is not okay. And you're not here for that. You do have permission to give distance because you can love someone and still need distance. You can bless someone and not be their trash can. You truly can. You can just say, I'm not a trash can, but I love you and I'm sending you love, but I'm needing space until something changes. And some people who are big boundary violators, they need us to serve up a consequence to their behavior. And that is so scary for so many of us. But that is sometimes the only way for somebody who's a true boundary violator, who really just wants to bulldoze right past the boundary clarity that you're giving them, right into I'm getting what I need or what I want anyway. That is the person that you need to hold that stronger boundary with a very clear consequence. So now you're listening to this podcast right now, and you're getting all these ideas of ways that you could talk to this person who tends to dump on you. And this is wonderful. You're feeling like juiced in it. You're like, I'm totally doing this. And then you leave and you get back into life. And then like a couple weeks later, when you finally get in contact with them, the energy's fizzled and you're kind of catching yourself getting back in that place. That is why this is our own internal work. It's not just a one and done. Boundary work is life work, and it is all about your freedom, your ability to feel liberated in your life, to have what you want to have, to go for it, to create the life you want, to the relationships that you want. Require these boundaries to keep yourself on task. Our little mantras, maybe you write them down somewhere where you get to see them often. Perhaps you say empowering thoughts every day when you start your day off. Today, I hold space for others without losing my center. That's my intention. Every time I start to stray, not feel well, I'm going to show up for myself. I'm going to set a boundary. You might realize that it happens very frequently throughout a single day. But I am not responsible for carrying what does not belong to me. And maybe that's a mantra. As soon as you smell that you're about to pick up something that doesn't belong to you, you're going to put it back down. Perhaps you say to yourself in the morning before you go off to work, my energy is sacred. I choose who I share it with. And maybe you don't walk over out of guilt to that person who you know is going to drain you. Maybe you don't do things because you feel like you have to or should, because your energy is sacred and it's your well-being, and it's more important than your fear, remember? So my connection to my well-being is getting stronger than my connection to my fear. And that's another one to just keep saying my connection to my well-being is getting stronger and stronger, stronger than my connection to fear. And that's how you want the scale to tip, that fear becomes less and less, and your connection and your dedication to your well-being gets more and more. And that's how the boundary work starts to really show up, is when your well-being gets more and more important. Not other people become less important, but your well-being becomes more important. And therefore your fear gets less and less. So let's start to wrap it up here by saying setting boundaries with negative people, especially when they're people we love, isn't about being cold or cutting anybody off. It's about choosing to stay rooted in your energy, your needs, and your peace. Again, that well-being getting stronger. You're choosing to stay rooted in your energy, your needs, and your peace. And as an empath, your compassion is your gift, but your capacity has limits. And you have to honor those limits. It's not just healthy, it's sacred. It's sacred to the life you want to have. It's everything. And here's what I hope you take away from today. You can support others without carrying their pain. You can be kind and clear at the same time. You can love someone and decide that certain conversations or dynamics are no longer okay for you. Whether it's a new acquaintance or a longtime loved one, remember your energy is a resource and you get to decide who and what gets access to it. That's your work. That's your responsibility. We get pissed when other people take it away from us. What we don't recognize is I gave it away. And then we get mad at ourselves. And I don't want you to get mad at yourself. I want you to have as much beautiful compassion and forgiveness for yourself every time you mess this up. Because I want you to just step right back in and say, my well-being is getting stronger and stronger. My fear is getting smaller and smaller. And then you just step right back on the path of doing the work. Thanks for being here and doing this deep, soulful work with me. I love talking about boundaries because, again, I really feel like it's the keys to the kingdom. Like it's life-changing. And it's incredible how you can have abundance and have beautiful things in your life just by setting boundaries, just learning how, because the boundary setting is not actually just the work. The work is healing your beliefs, healing your fears, healing all the things that are getting in the way of you setting the boundary. Those are the things that are blocking you in life. And that's why setting boundaries is so freeing. And so I'm really excited that we got to have this conversation together. If this episode spoke to you, take a moment to share it with a fellow empath, please, or like somebody that you know this is a sensitive soul that needs to hear this, someone you know that needs boundary work. Leave a review. It also helps this work reach more people who need it. Until next time, keep listening inward, protect your light. I will look forward to talking with you next week. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to Into the Work Therapy for Empaths and Seekers. Don't forget to grab your free gift, your Shadow Work Transformation Bundle at michellepoverman.com. I've included everything you need to get started to break through the patterns of self-sabotage and finally start to heal the parts of yourself that are getting in the way of truly reaching your potential. From a powerful meditation designed to help you meet and embrace your shadow self, to the guide that's full of curated prompts and important questions to support you on this journey. This really can be the work for you to unmask the root cause of all the issues you've been experiencing, honestly, and start to feel free to believe in yourself and go for what you want. The link for this free bundle is in the show notes. And if you like this episode, I would be so grateful if you could take a moment and rate, click and follow, and leave a review. Of course, you can always follow me on socials at Michelle Poverman. And keep in mind, as you embark on your journey from spark to brilliance, remember, the universe is always conspiring in favor of your awakening. Everything that's happening is in support of you lighting your own fire within. So until we meet again, may your path be well lit and your heart be guided. Shine bright, seekers. Until next time.